Thanks, Jan. And I'm so happy to be here with you today. I'm always excited to celebrate you and the good work that you do. So I think if I were to kind of summarize it in a quick sentence about sort of what I'm doing these days, I'm a strategist, I'm a facilitator, I'm a trainer, and what I'm really focused on these days is creating engaging online. These used to be in person, but engaging online environments that help people to connect and collaborate and create. And that's really been the emphasis of my in-person events. I do a lot of training with new and growth stage entrepreneurs, and all of that has moved virtual. And in fact, I thought that that would start to represent less and less of the work that I'm doing in my business, but it's more and more. So now that I've taken it virtual, I seem to have access to a much broader base of clients. And so the requests keep coming and it's keeping me busy.
I love to hear that. Actually, let me turn off our titles because now everyone should know who we are, right?
Great.
This is like, it's been amazing to see how the first conversations that we had, I think you were a little bit skeptical of moving things virtual. So was I. But I'm curious, what changed it for you? Like, what was maybe something that you've noticed or experienced where like, oh, I think I'm going to go all in on continuing my work virtually.
Yeah. So I it's interesting that you asked that because in March, what started happening is that my clients, my existing client base, started asking me to do virtual events. And I agreed to that because that's what you do when clients want you to do things. But with my own confab community, I think I did one event kind of early on, and it felt so different and so foreign that I don't know, I think I got scared or I kind of got overwhelmed, or I just felt like there was a layer of, I don't know what to call that. Is it soulfulness? I don't know. Like some kind of, there was a layer of authenticity that was missing. And of course it was missing because at my confab events, I spend 2 days cooking and we hang out outside and we go kayaking and we do all kinds of things. And so all of that becomes very difficult to translate into an environment where we have to sit in front of a screen and look into this little camera.
Hmm.
So I think that initially, I was doing those client events, but in my mind, it was almost like the client's events. The reason that that was okay is because those are kind of soulless events anyway. And that when it came to the soulful events, there was nothing to be done and we had to wait till COVID was over. And when I signed up for your class, actually, it was on the theory that for my client events, I needed to be better at the tech aspect of what I was doing. And what I discovered in the context of your class was that, first of all, that it was very possible to bring soulfulness into online experiences. And I learned that not only from the content that you were teaching, but also from how you were teaching it. So we had a lot of, I think, very powerful relationship building that was happening right from the first day. And people were leaving with kind of a feeling. And I think that ultimately that's kind of what, as a facilitator, that's how I measure my success is, can I tell almost energetically that when people are leaving the room, they feel different, they feel up, they feel elevated, they feel connected. And that was the part of it that I didn't really believe I'd be able to reproduce for my confab community, which I had given so much heart to, that it felt weird to now come into a virtual environment where it feels a little bit more, at least at the time, it felt a little bit more stiff.
Yeah, like it totally makes sense. And like I felt the same way that in the beginning I wasn't sure if we can recreate any of those magical human moments, those genuine moments of connection. And like to me the big solution was breakout rooms. Like once I discovered breakout rooms, the whole world changed. I'm like, okay, this is where connection happens in small groups, in like small group activities, conversations. It doesn't happen with like 30, 40 people staring at a gallery view grid of a bunch of people with one person talking. But I also remember that in the second week, we talked about one specific topic that was kind of a big insight for you. I would love for you to
Yeah.
share a bit more about what that was.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you invited that, because when you said, the thing that fixed it for me was breakout rooms, inside my head, I thought, but I knew about breakout rooms and that wasn't enough, right? So,
Hmm.
for me, there's a kind of in the events that I love the most, there's a kind of a nourishment that goes on at the front end of those events so that when people go into breakout rooms, some magic is happening. So, for me, my job as a facilitator really focuses on what can I do in that front end to set the energy. And so in the second week in your program, we talked about psychological safety. And I have to tell you honestly that when you kind of announced that that was the topic, I was like, oh, this doesn't apply to me, because I kind of saw that in the context of, I know that you do work with very, very vulnerable questions. There were some other facilitators in our group who deal with quite sensitive or tender topics like sexual health and other things like that. And I was like, well, obviously, you need to create psychological safety in the context of those kinds of conversations. But this is like networking for entrepreneurs. Why do we need psychological safety? And as you went through the slides that week, it was like fireworks were going off in my head one after another. And I realized, for starters, that part of what I was doing at the front end in my live events to establish that kind of nourishing, energetic baseline is what you would call psychological safety. I was creating psychological safety and kind of cohesion in the group. And basically since then, like now we're a few weeks out from the end of that program, I continue to think about psychological safety all the time. And I think, to kind of bring it into what's been happening in this week in the world, I think that the truth is that COVID has left many of us feeling tender and vulnerable and potentially downtrodden about what's happening in the state of the world. And so to me, it's becoming more and more apparent that psychological safety is a really important gift that a facilitator can give to a group. And that without that, you can't get to the same outcomes. Maybe that's not relevant for every single kind of facilitator, although I might argue that it is. But that the idea of creating psychological safety and the kinds of techniques that you went through, and also that you workshopped with us and that we experimented with, you can really see that that is what makes the difference, and that's the piece that was missing for me.
Yeah, I love that, and I love like the psychological safety training that ends up being some of my most favorite conversations I'm having with this group of facilitators, because I'm learning from each one of them as well. It's not that I'm the expert of everything. I actually want there to be conversations. I want there to be activities that are being created kind of on the spot with everyone that is participating, because there's, yeah, like you said, there's people who've had, like, for them psychological safety is so important, even more important to than the work that I do. So they have learned different tricks that they might have applied to in person, but not have yet figured out how to do it online. And yeah, I always like to experiment. So I think you probably saw me try a few different things that I've never done before as well.
And I think that's one of the things that I think is really valuable about the group that forms around these trainings, is that first off, that we are all feeling our way. I mean, nobody is an expert on 2021 at this point, right? So and on what people need in 2021 and what's going to continue to not just sustain their attention, but also to sustain their energy, to sustain their focus, to sustain them, to nourish them, which is really fundamentally in the end what I think most of what I do is about nourishment. So I really loved that topic. I loved that topic being brought to my awareness. I thought for sure that tech was going to be the most important thing I was going to learn. That was the area where I felt the least confident. But it's kind of that thing, how you can work on the things that you're not that good at, and you'll be kind of not that good, but a little bit better. Or you can work on the things that you are good at, and you can become a master. And I think that that's the feeling that I was able to get from the psychological safety piece, is that there's a lot about that I'm intuitively good at. I feel like you've given me some tools now to really take it so much more next level. And I can see already, even in my client events, that there's a little bit of a different energy to it. Also, I feel more relaxed because
Hmm.
I'm very clear on the steps I need to go through to get to that outcome. Whereas before, I think I was just kind of feeling my way in the dark a little bit. And it was working out, but it was kind of stressful for me because I didn't really know, it didn't really click for me that psychological safety was what I was after.
Yeah, and like from having attended your sessions, I think you already had that intuitively built into your events. But I think what happened of just talking about it in more of like a here's the things, the specific activities you can do that help build that safety, or a way to run an activity that is more inclusive to having people feeling
Mm.
seen and heard in the beginning, made you understand, oh, I already have all these tools. I wasn't even aware that they existed.
I love that. I love that. And thank you, Jan. Thank you for doing this work. I really think that right now, especially for all of the facilitators out there and the ones that are just coming into doing virtual events, this is a really important for all of us who are holders of space and openers of containers and conversations. And I think the more we can feel confident in the skills that we have to facilitate that, the world really needs us right now. And people feel alone, and the tools are there for us to fix that. So thank you for sharing that work and doing this in this important time.
Thank you. That really means a lot.